Bismillah Rahman Rahim. The former British Prime Minister Tony Blair recently declared that Labour no longer had a program. For once, he's absolutely correct. In this video, I'm going to prove that Labour is directionless precisely because of the 10 years of Labourite politics, the slick antiseptic political experiment that was marketed as New Labour to a new generation in the 1990s. And it is remembered by millions as the systematic liquidation of everything the Labour movement once stood for. Blair did not modernize Labour. Blair embalmed it. Blair presided over the systematic and irreversible destruction of a movement born in trade union halls, dockyards, and working class solidarity, and he converted it into a consultancy firm with a red logo and a corporate smile instead of a corporate ethic. A movement that once frightened empires has now become a PowerPoint for a Davos presentation. And the tragedy of Labour is not confined to Britain, because Labour movements worldwide are connected. From Europe to Australia, from North America to Scandinavia, from trade union federations to transnational worker alliances, Labour movements has always drawn strength from one another. For example, the International Trade Union Confederation links over 200 million workers globally. Can you think of any other organization that does that? Labour Start mobilizes workers across borders within a matter of hours. And they used to do it for a long period of time, but then along came Blair and his Blairism concealed in the new Labour. New Labour, a doctrine so obsessed with appearing market friendly that it slowly taught centre left parties across the world to become ashamed of Labour itself. Blairism accepted the new liberal framework of Thatcherism almost in its entirety and merely painted the machinery beige instead of blue. It normalized privatization, it embraced deregulation, it weakened trade union power while pretending to champion social justice, all the while investing presidential powers in the office of the Prime Minister. And worst of all, Blairism taught Labour parties everywhere that survival depended on sounding like conservatives. If Labour and Conservatives become alike and they start speaking the same language, defending the same ethos, espousing the same markets, worshipping the same financial institutions, then why would people not simply vote for the original conservatives rather than their Mandelson generated clones? Blairism left Labour politically homeless, clueless. The Prime Minister's only claim to fame, the Prime Minister of the time, the Blairist Prime Minister, his only claim to fame was that he became more loyal to the kings in the White House than to the Queen and Buckingham Palace. Blairism became the highest priest of an Atlantic order, permanently auditioning to get approval from Washington. Kosovo became the stage where this unconditional loyalty was first tested. Kosovo was to Blairism what Falklands was to Thatcherism, and they were only looking for a General Galtieri. It was a grand moral performance, or at least Blair thought so. In fact, it was a moral theatre which tried to put up moral grandeur. The show became so burlesque so soon that Bill Clinton had to call Tony Blair and remind him who was in charge of the operation in Kosovo. Labour's moral credibility was deliberately shattered in exchange for proximity to George W. Bush. 139 Labour MPs rebelled against Blairism and its warmongering. Robin Cook resigned, Claire Short resigned, millions marched in protest chanting, Bush, go back and take Blair with you. While Blair marched obediently into the catastrophe and the arms of the regime in Washington. It was in this moment that Blairism detonated a generational civil war inside Labour. And that fracture continues till today. Tony Blair now lectures Labour about lacking direction. But what exactly did the Blairite movement leave behind except factional exhaustion and ideological confusion? The third way was neither genuinely socialistic nor honestly conservative. It was politics stripped of conviction and reconstructed as managerial performance art. Interestingly, Blair himself said that things, no matter how realistic, must always be rooted in idealism. Even in Scandinavia, the sacred cathedral of social democracy, this infection of Blairism was felt. Sweden and Denmark became important quasi-markets in public services. Welfare shifted from citizenship rights to conditional workfare. How much that contributed to the Great Recession of 2007-2008 is a separate topic that must be explored by economists today. Had vibrant old Labour been around to check the unfettered capitalism that ensued from deregulation and that saw the fall of the housing market and the failure of the banks and ultimately the rise of the Tea Party, maybe inclusive politics that had not been put to death by people like Roger Stone, maybe all of us today were not living in the Roger Stone age. And people so often forget the story of the Nordic labor movement. The Nordic left did not collapse overnight. It was shattered slowly. Once labor was strong across the world, it even dominated Israeli politics. Today, the Labour Party in Israel has collapsed into a near irrelevance. 4 seats in a parliament of 120. That is not merely electoral decline, it's ideological extinction. And it matters because labor movements globally have always been historically intertwined. The Norwegian labor movement helped facilitate the Oslo peace process in 1993 through trade union networks, researchers, and a quiet diplomacy which was powered by the nucleus of labor. Labor politics once attempted to build bridges in the Middle East through trust, mediation, and human contact, but Blairism ended all that. True, New Labour pushed for peace in Northern Ireland. Yes, they helped push the Good Friday Agreement, no one can deny them that. But it were people like Bertie Ahern, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland, Mo Morlan, the representative for Northern Ireland, and above all, George Mitchell, who built the architecture for peace. The principles on which the peace framework was built were called the Mitchell principles, not the Blairite principles. And to his credit, Bill Clinton stayed away because he did not want to steal the limelight from a person who was very concerned about it. John Major had prepared the groundwork for Tony Blair, but even he allowed Tony Blair to take the limelight, which he truly enjoyed. He was, in his own mind, the seneschal of all things great. Yet Blairism always possessed that peculiar habit of converting collective achievement into personalized mythology. That is why labor struggles today. Because after years of ideological triangulation, which what remained was not a movement but a vacancy. Just like Congress in India, no one has ever been able to fill the vacancy created by Indira Gandhi's assassination. So profound is Blairism's newfound fascination with artificial intelligence that Mr. Blair speaks about technological disruption and the radical center as though labor simply needs fresher software updates. But here's the question. After decades spent teaching labor to worship markets, class politics, conservative economics, and above all, Mr. Blair himself, how exactly do you expect the party to produce a bold alternative leadership? How can labor confront AI driven inequality with a philosophy that already treats workers as disposable inputs in a global marketplace? Isn't this capitalism gone mad? Labor's, labor's place where human interaction are so transactional that they will be dictated by someone holding a laptop computer in a living room very far away. So, how can labor resist corporate greed when Blairism trained it to worship corporate power? Tony Blair accuses labor of drifting into a comfort zone. But perhaps the truth is far uglier. Perhaps labor is wandering through the ruins of Blairism. A party once powered by miners, railwaymen, dock workers, teachers, nurses, and unions now spends its time focus grouping verbs to avoid frightening hedge funds. That is the legacy of Blairism, and guess what? It is, in many ways, far worse than the legacy of Thatcherism. Not modernization, not renewal, but the slow conversion of a historic labor movement into an anxious public relations exercise, permanently seeking permission from financial markets and foreign allies before remembering its own people. And the fact that its own people exists is just a sorry state of affairs. Mr. Blair may be wondering why labor lacks direction. Well, here's the answer. When a compass is hollowed long enough, eventually it stops pointing anywhere. Every time Blairism tries to address a problem, it opens two loopholes when it closes one. Far from finding long term solutions to problems, you know what Blairism did? It replaced Benite solutions with Blairite opportunities, which some have often called insoluble opportunities. And for a moment, it appeared after the end of Blairism, apparently. For a moment, it appears that men like Jeremy Corbyn would cleanse labor of its ills, but that turned out to be a false dawn. Money played its part in the process. I tell this story because I want people to realize that the demise of labor did not happen in a vacuum. It was a death sentence which was passed on labor after years of deliberation. And death sentence that was passed on labor is called Blairism.